dia a tothom. Reprenem la sessió. L'any anterior, en l'edició que vam organitzar aquí des de la Fundació CatDem, vàrem parlar, vàrem debatre, vàrem discutir sobre els diferents tipus de nacionalisme. Bàsicament, els nostres ponents, els participants, explicaven i explicitaven les diferències existents entre un nacionalisme de caire populista, a voltes o molt sovint xenòfob, i un nacionalisme inclusiu, cosmopolita, com pot ser el nacionalisme que tradicionalment s'ha defensat no només des de Convergència, sinó des del catalanisme polític. Bé, aprofundint en aquest debat, que entenem que és un debat que potser a casa nostra el tenim superat o força superat, però en d'altres contrades europees, per bé que la democràcia estigui molt consolidada, molt sovint aquest debat torna a l'escena política i es produeixen interpretacions que a voltes són una mica confoses i de vegades són terriblement esbiaixades, almenys per aquells que defensem un nacionalisme inclusiu, liberal i generador de cohesió social com ha estat tradicionalment el nacionalisme català. Bé, en el context de populisme i nacionalisme i de la crisi econòmica que està frapant enormement el territori europeu, ens semblava molt pertinent, a banda de portar aquests ponents que segur que tindran moltes coses interessants i significatives per explicar, ens semblava molt rellevant, insistia, en parlar dels efectes que han tingut aquesta crisi econòmica a nivell polític, social, institucional, etc. Bé, sense més dilació, passaré a presentar els nostres ponents, que venen de 3 estats europeus diferenciats. A la meva esquerra, o de fet tots estan a la meva esquerra, potser és una orientació ideològica, tenim l'amiga, la senyora Lamprini Rori, que ve de Grècia. Seguidament tenim el senyor Zoltán Kész, que ve de Hongria. Hongria és un país que jo li tinc molt d'interès i molta estima perquè he conegut molt de prop les comunitats hongareses d'arreu dels països a l'entorn d'Hongria. I finalment tenim un bon amic de Finlàndia, un país que hi ha una comunitat d'origen suec, suecoparlant molt important, que és el senyor Viktor Grandell. Bé, passaré a fer una breu semblança de la senyora Lamprini Rori i posteriorment també faré el mateix amb els següents participants. La Lamprini Rori està acabant la seva tesi doctoral en política comparada a la Universitat de París, França, per bé que ella, com us deia abans, és d'Atenes, de Grècia. El tema de la seva tesi es centra en els processos de canvi dels partits per mitjà de la comunicació política en els partits socialistes de Grècia i de França. Durant els darrers 3 anys ha treballat com a investigadora en un projecte col·lectiu sobre l'augment de l'extrema dreta a la ciutat d'Atenes. També participa en el projecte de la Unió Europea dissenyant i operant una infraestructura per la comprensió empírica del radicalisme polític i social a Grècia. I ha publicat diversos capítols en publicacions col·lectives. Agraïm molt la presència de la Lamprini Rori. Lamprini, thanks so much for being here. Great pleasure for us that you are with us. And I shall now stop speaking and I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
The ongoing financial and debt crisis in Greece constitute certainly a fertile ground for the rise of political extremism. And although right-wing extremism, the way we see it today in Greece, is a unique phenomenon since the transition to democracy of 1974, what I will argue today is that its roots are found decades ago in Greek politics and society. So fears and feelings of insecurity are on the rise in Greece since the beginning of the 1990s. Immigration, multiculturalism of an until then relatively homogeneous society Europeanization and globalization have widespread anxiety and dissatisfaction that have begun to overwhelm the modernization losers and the most weak segments of the Greek society. Also, a deeper sense of anti-Westernism and anti-pluralism since the 19th century have given rise, and the rise of populism in the 1990s have constituted the fertile ground for the cultivation of new fears and new kinds of insecurity in the era of the financial crisis. So the demand for radical politics after 2010 was not only the consequence of the financial crisis and the debt crisis in Greece, but also the coincidence of a series of crises regarding political institutions and the cohesion of the social network. I have divided the presentation in 3 questions, and the first one is what lies behind the widespread disenchantment with traditional parties, and do voters feel represented by mainstream political parties in Greece?
Excuse me, could you slow down a little bit for the interpreters?
Okay, thank you. Yes. There have been significant changes since the outbreak of the economic crisis in the Greek party system and the political contest. If we consider the electoral results as a safe indicator of changes in party competition, there have been 3 major shifts following the 2012 elections. The first was the widespread disenchantment with traditional mainstream political parties, with the spectacular electoral losses of the center-left party and the center-right party, PASOK and New Democracy. The second was the impressive score of the radical left party, the party of Syriza, which until that date was a minor party of the left, embracing Maoist, Trotskyist, Marxist and Stalinist groups and factions. And the third was the comfortable parliamentarian representation of the Golden Dawn, currently the most xenophobic right-wing extremist party of the European Parliament. In this graph, you can see a spatial illustration of the Greek party competition from 2009 to 2012. The horizontal axis represents a broadly defined ideological continuum ranging from left, which is 0, to right, which is 10. The vertical axis denotes the vote share of the parties in percentages. So you can see the electoral shock from 2009 to 2012 for PASOK and New Democracy, and in the third graph you can see the rise of Syriza. Undoubtedly, the rise of the Golden Dawn has been the most shocking evolution. Notwithstanding its extremist, ultranationalist, anti-parliamentarian and Nazi-friendly ideological profile, what has been mostly alarming was the rapid ascendance of this violent groupuscule that until the local elections of 2010 has had extremely marginal electoral appeal. In this graph you can see the social demography of voters of Golden Dawn, Syriza and the Communist Party. By gaining 7% in the 2012 elections, the Golden Dawn rapidly shifts from the margins to the center of the political arena. It is mostly appealing to men, the relatively young, from 25 to 44 especially, years old, of secondary education, and to individuals experiencing labor insecurity. As you can see, Golden Dawn and Syriza and Kukue compete for the same actual electorate. So how did this become possible? For one to answer this question, one has to see the political context of the 2012 elections and the social background that lies behind the rise of the Golden Dawn. Among short-term factors, the economic crisis, the austerity measures, polarization and the cleavages that they nourish constitute the fertile ground for the rise of the extremes and the populist vote. According to the exit poll of 2012 elections, 53% of the voters casted their vote having in mind the memorandum, whereas 47% by having in mind the stay in the Eurozone. Among the medium-term factors, there has been a steady decline in levels of political trust since 2009, which has accelerated since the emergence of the crisis. More specifically, there has been a general decline in trust in governments and parties in the legislative and the judiciary institutions between 2003 and 2010, so already before the economic crisis, and compared to the countries in Southern Europe and the countries in crisis, Greece shows the strongest decline in political trust in parliaments after the emergence of the crisis in 2009. Trust is particularly low in political institutions linked to interest representation like the EU, trade unions, the Parliament and the IMF, and it rises when it comes to social institutions which unify the social body, offering security like the army and the police, or provide spiritual cohesion within the ethno-cultural entirety. Hence, the presuppositions, the circumstances for the rise of populism and populist protest were ideally present even before the economic crisis. Are voters unrealistic in their demands for alternatives to austerity policies? Social feelings about cohesion have to be examined in order to understand what drives demand for alternative to austerity politics. Greek citizens not only distrust political institutions, but they feel abandoned, feared, and disappointed. Among them, most of all, the youngest and the Middle Ages, the voters of Golden Dawn, but Syriza as well. So from 2004 to 2008, as you can see, the majority of citizens were fairly and very optimistic, whereas since the beginning of the crisis, there has been a radical decline in the levels of optimism. Since March 2010, not at all optimistic views are majoritarian, hence there is a steady deficit of social trust since the beginning of the crisis. Citizens from 18 to 54 feel that they are in a worse position than they experience and than the ones that experienced their fathers, whereas citizens older than 55 years old feel that they are in a better one than their parents. So the second question of my presentation is, how do people engage in politics since the outbreak of the economic crisis? Active engagement in politics has shifted from mainstream political parties to grassroots action and protest. Four were the highlights of the Greek crisis experience. The first were the outraged residents of Athens. The second was the movement of the outraged citizens, the so-called indignados. The third was the I Won't Pay movement, and the fourth is a violent activism that has presented a very local character. All of them subscribe to the anti-memorandum camp. The first one I will now present is the outraged resident of Athens and the strategy of the Golden Dawn. Since autumn 2008, there have been grassroots movements, the so-called citizens' committees, in the most underprivileged and densely populated by immigrants areas of the city center. Outraged residents concentrated around the square of Agios Panteleimonas in order to protest against immigrants and reclaim their neighborhood. This has constituted a structure of political opportunity for the electoral ascendance of the Golden Dawn.
Excuse me, I am asked, again, I'm sorry, to slow down a little bit.
Okay, sorry. Okay, the Golden Dawn followed a two-step strategy from 2008 until the elections of 2012. The first was from 2008 to 2010, meaning the elections for the municipality, where it created its strongholds with local presence, mobilization, and visibility. This is how it succeeded electoral breakthrough and its first institutional representation in the city of Athens. From November 2010 until the elections of 2012, it expanded its organizational penetration and it diffused in the territory. This is how it succeeded electoral rise at the national level. It used a twofold method in order to penetrate in the local population. It provided goods and services to aged people and security to shop owners, and it used violence in order to protest against the rivals. So the Golden Dawn succeeded this way in augmenting its sphere of influence, recruiting and promoting activists, placing a series of issues in the public agenda. We consider it to be this institutional representation, especially of 2010, very important because it gave the Golden Dawn legitimacy, further visibility and mediatization, and permitted further organizational expansion for the 2012 parliamentary election. The second is the movement of the outraged citizens, which was the most massive and enduring protest movement in the post-Junta period. In the summer of 2011, thousands of citizens were concentrating every night in the Constitution Square, and in the central squares of the biggest cities in order to express their rage against the political personnel, the parliament, and the political system. Success was related to the extensive use of social media as a tool for mobilization, diffusion, and organization. The extreme right activists were placed in the upper side of the square, whereas the left wing were established in the lower one. A popular assembly was taking place every night, and numerous tents were placed in the square where activists lived in order to mark the occupation. According to some findings, although the outraged citizens supported a diffuse idea of democracy, there is no specific support in democracy as an applied regime or system of government. Despite the fact that violence is condemned, the fact that 2/3 of the respondents were either tolerant to the violence that others used against politicians or in favor of it indicates the complicated and sensitive link between direct political action and democratic authority. What the mass mobilization of outraged citizens in Athens has revealed is that the disposition to tolerance, or even to the use of tolerance, is large within the different social milieu, as well as a rejection of parliamentary democracy. Anti-parliamentarianism, anti-partyism, and an attitude of protest were all present after the outbreak of the economic crisis in Greece. The third form of activism was the I Won't Pay movement, which was a citizens' mobilization against paying taxes. It subscribed in the anti-memorandum camp and rhetoric, and the repertoire of this movement ranges from blockade of highway toll booths or covering subway ticket machines to refusal of paying property tax. Although this was very popular in Greece, we don't know whether actually it has been an action of civil disobedience or a played-safe revolt of the middle classes against the austerity measures without the risk of facing legal consequences, what in political science we call a free rider behavior. And the last form of activism is violent activism with very local character that has been very popular after the 2012 elections as well. Two very characteristic examples were the local anti-gold investment movement in Skouries in northern Greece and the violent activity of the Golden Dawn in the popular southwest areas of Keratsini and Perama. This new kind of violent activism is located in certain areas, and whereas the first one is left-wing driven and is addressing a local problem, the second one is right-wing driven and concerns the strategy of the Golden Dawn in order to penetrate in popular suburbs by the means of frontal confrontation with the left in order to win the blue collars, the youth, and the insecure. The common feature of all these phenomena was their anti-systemic and populist mass character. And the third question of my presentation is what motivates protest votes. In the municipal elections of the 2010, immigration figured among the dominant issues of the public agenda, at least for the residents of the city center. Lack of public policy concerning immigration and the dense concentration of immigrants in certain areas of the city center, as well as the fear of the local population vis-à-vis the immigrants, which they have been connecting to criminality and unemployment, constituted a momentum of political opportunity for the electoral breakthrough of the Golden Dawn in 2010. In 2010, the Golden Dawn was the anti-immigrant party par excellence. This was not the case in the 2012 elections. Immigration did not play at all in the agenda of the 2012 elections. If we compare the motives of the Golden Dawn voters to those of all voters in 2012, it becomes clear that it was political protest, anti-parliamentarian and anti-political stances, the opposition vis-à-vis the memorandum, and the permanence in the Eurozone which motivated citizens to vote for the Golden Dawn. According to the exit poll of the 2012 elections, half of the electorate of the Golden Dawn feels too close to the party, so it hasn't been a vote by chance. And some concluding remarks. The enduring and constant lack of public policies vis-à-vis immigration contributed to the electoral increase of the Golden Dawn. Voting for the Golden Dawn was a choice of rejection than a positive one. It meant voting against all the others, the institutions, the ideologies, the establishment. The conservatives tried to respond to this accusation, the socialists and the left to stigmatize the extreme right and to put it in the margins. Nor the one, neither the other seemed to be appropriate methods to confront with it. The recent prosecution of the party members is reflected with losses in public support towards the Golden Dawn in the polls. However, the fact that the party keeps a stable support superior to its electoral forces needs to raise awareness on the strong roots of populism and extremism in the Greek society and eventual institutional responses of countering the phenomenon. Thank you.
Marc, can you swap places so that I can present from here?
Yeah, of course.
Do you want me to move?
No, I will sit there.
Bé, moltes gràcies. Em sembla que ha sigut molt interessant la intervenció de la senyora Lamprini Rori i ens ha permès constatar que algunes de les circumstàncies o algunes de les emergències polítiques que s'han produït en un país llunyà però proper com Grècia també s'han esdevingut a casa nostra, potser no amb la mateixa virulència, amb la mateixa intensitat. També és veritat que l'acció o la destrucció de la crisi econòmica a Grècia ha estat més forta que la que hem viscut aquí segurament, i la intervenció per part de les institucions europees i internacionals, però per bé, com veieu, hi ha elements que s'assemblen molt al cas de Catalunya, com el moviment No Vull Pagar, que també s'ha reproduït també per altres qüestions a casa nostra. I també un altre element que ha significat la senyora Rori és el fet que hi ha una transmissió de vot electoral entre antics votants de l'extrema esquerra vers l'extrema dreta. Ella mateixa això ho ha pogut comprovar o ho pot comprovar a França, on a les properes eleccions europees, segons ens estan mostrant les darreres enquestes, podria fins i tot el Front Nacional guanyar les eleccions, i a Grècia també això s'està esdevenint amb una transmissió o una transferència de vots en els barris, diríem, més potser marginals o més presència d'immigrants de l'extrema esquerra cap a l'extrema dreta o de partits que tradicionalment formaven part de l'establishment. Si alguna característica comuna té l'extrema dreta i l'extrema esquerra és aquest caràcter sovint demagògic, populista i certament anti-establishment, i de trobar tots aquells mals que es produeixen a casa veure culpables fora. Seguidament, havent agraït a la Lamprini Rori la seva intervenció, ara a la meva dreta passarem la paraula a en Zoltán Kész, o millor dit Kész Zoltán, perquè a Hongria primer va el cognom i després el nom, que, com ens diu el seu currículum, és un dels fundadors de la Fundació Mercat Lliure d'Hongria. El senyor Kész va tenir l'oportunitat d'estudiar als Estats Units. Uns anys més tard va ser professor d'Història dels Estats Units en un institut de Califòrnia com a becari de la prestigiosa beca o Fundació Fulbright. El 2013 va ser escollit president de la Plataforma Cívica, del partit polític, que és una organització independent que té com a objectiu, segons ens diu, augmentar la participació a les eleccions del 2014. Donem la paraula al senyor Kész, que de ben segur té moltes coses a aportar-nos en aquest debat que tenim avui aquí a la seu de la Fundació CATDEM. Endavant.
This one. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. It's my honor to be here in Barcelona, in a wonderful city. This is my first time here, so I'm trying to enjoy as much as I can. I will try to speak slowly so that the interpreters will have a better chance to translate what I have to say, and I believe I will have a lot to say, so if I speak fast, the gentleman will probably tell me that I speak fast, okay? And you might ask me, why Hungary? What's so interesting about this tiny little country in Central Europe? and with 10 million people only, almost like, Catalonia probably. But, a lot of bad things came from Central Europe if you look at history, and whatever is going on in Central Europe, especially in Hungary nowadays, might give you some chance to worry about processes and things that will not make us so optimistic in connection with the European Union. Just before I start, it was a very interesting thing. Yesterday when I was coming here at the airport in Budapest, I bought a magazine. It's a historic magazine, and I looked at the very back, and there is the electorate of Hungary, and I said, oh my God, this is my topic. Are they stealing my topic? And I started to read the article, and I realized that yes, this is my topic, but then I realized that this is talking about the 1930s. This is talking about pre-Second World War Hungary, and you will see the resemblance of a lot of things that I'm going to talk about today in what was happening in pre-Second World War Hungary. And that is the problem that worries me, that worries my organization, and that should worry a lot of people all around Europe. So let's start after this short introduction. There will be 3 topics that I'm going to cover. One is going to be closely related to economics and closely related to what the present government is doing, some radical collectivist measures that it has been introducing in the past 3 years since it came to power in 2010. The second part of my presentation is going to be about the rise of nationalism. I would say the rise of Nazism, the rise of neo-fascism. You will see some very shocking pictures, maybe some very offensive pictures, forgive me for that, but this is reality, unfortunately. And in the very last part of my presentation, I will focus on what my foundation is doing, because our foundation is a very active one. We don't usually have conferences. We go to the streets and try to give answers to people in the streets and the online media, social media. So you will see a lot of things. So let's start with the first one, with radical collectivism. Some background information in connection with that. In 2010, the new government came to power with a 2/3 majority, which is unprecedented in the European Union. As far as I know, no more countries in the EU have a government with a 2/3 majority. So what can a 2/3 majority do? Anything. It can do anything. It can carry out measures that people would not even dream of. And I will mention just some of them, really connected to collectivist measured collectivism, very radical ones. These 4 things that I'm going to mention in order is the nationalization of private pension funds. Then I will talk a little bit about some retrospective taxation, punitive taxation, meaning that they punished different sectors for doing well, for making profit. I will talk about the tobacco retail monopoly that the government is having right now, and also I will mention the state control over savings banks. Now, nationalization of private pension funds. Back in the 1990s, after the transition, we were very proud to be one of the first Eastern European countries to have a very efficient, very good private pension system introduced. It was introduced in 1997, and people, were normally collecting their money for their retired years in their private pension funds. What happened? 2010 came with the elections, and the new government, which faced a lot of budget deficit that a lot of countries in the EU do, decided to find what they call an unorthodox solution. An unorthodox solution meaning that, well, let's take away what belongs to others. Let's nationalize what a lot of people have accumulated throughout the years. And one of their first laws that they passed was the nationalization of these funds. So it was channeled, these funds were channeled into the national budget. And this is not a sole example in the EU. Right now, there's another country doing exactly the same thing. You know which country? Right now, Donald Tusk from Poland. He's looking at Hungary saying that, oh, look at the Hungarian government. They've been so successful. Right now, Poland is doing the same thing. And we are very scared that these anti-liberal measures will spread to other countries. Our prime minister is very proud, saying, look, with the unorthodox measures, we've been followed. We have other countries doing the same things, stealing people's money. Is that normal? Obviously not. I mean, I believe in this audience, nobody would say that this is normal. Okay, next one. You know, there are certain sectors in the economy that have been doing quite well in the past, let's say 20 years since the transition. A lot of them are multinational companies. A lot of them are German, French companies. And the Prime Minister, using the rhetoric, saying that, oh, the money should remain here in our country. We should not let foreign companies take away our money in form of a profit. So what they did, they introduced taxes which punished the participants of this sector, or these sectors like energy sector, telecom sector, so that, you know, extra taxes, they take money away from these very successful companies, upsetting a lot of politicians, Angela Merkel, for example, in Germany. My favorite, well, in quotation marks, favorite tax or measure is what we have here, the slash on utility costs. This is something very new. It started this year, and what it means is the government introduced a measure which forced private electricity and water and gas companies to reduce their prices. And when I get my bill at the end of each month, it says, I don't know, 30 euros, but due to the government, and the government's color is orange, and it's written in orange, nice propaganda, due to the government measure, you'll get 10% off. And from November the 1st, an extra 11% off. So our elections are gonna be held next year. You know, the only campaign slogan the government has, they have already started campaigning, is this one, the slash on utility taxes. We are punishing the multinationals. We are saving your money. Yesterday, when we had the national holiday in Hungary, there were more than 500,000 people rallying behind the Prime Minister saying that we are winning the war against the multinationals. We should cut more, not only 21%. Imagine that. That's why I said it's my favorite. Nothing in connection with spending has ever been brought up by this very anti-liberal and unorthodox camp. Okay, I have a question. What do you think this is? Any guesses? It's 18. Forbidden, yes, for underage people. Last time when I was giving a speech in Slovenia for young audience, everybody said, it's porn. It's something about sex. No, although it says 18, it says national tobacco. That's what it says in Hungarian. That's why I deliberately left it in Hungarian. National tobacco. A couple of months ago, the Hungarian government monopolized the tobacco retail industry, which means that their friends could open tobacco stores, and they are the only ones in the country who can sell tobacco. Another example of a very unorthodox and anti-liberal measure. What is the consequence? Any guesses? What is the consequence if you can buy cigarette? Yeah, I mean, in the past 3 months, we've seen smuggling go up like this. And less tax money from legal sale of tobacco. Okay, let's move on. That's the last or the latest of something that they call very unorthodox. The government passed a law 3 months ago in which they stated that savings banks would be bought, well, partially bought by the government, which would mean that government would have 51% of every savings bank around the country, which is now forcing foreign banks slowly, gradually leave the country. Another, well, from their interpretation, the money should stay here. It's understandable. But if you look at, free market processes, if you look at liberalism, it's in my opinion, it's inexplicable, unexplainable. Let me just gulp something. Okay. So this is when I talked about radical collectivism, and I believe that Dr. Casals was talking about a different form of nationalism and populism in different parts of Europe. And when I talk about populism, I mean the current government, because they are very populistic in their measures concerning the economy. When I talk about nationalism, however, I talk about something totally different. I will talk about another party which causes a lot of worries, not only to us, but I believe to everybody in the European Union. This party is called the Jobbik. I will have the name later on. They are openly anti-Semitic, anti-Roma. It's very worrisome that they are represented in the European Parliament with 3 representatives. They have more than 14% in the Hungarian Parliament, which is also very worrisome if you add the 2/3 of the populist government party and another 14% of the nationalist extreme right. Now, this conference is about the link between economics and nationalism, one way or the other. However, it's not only economics that causes the rise of this nationalist party. We have to go back in history, and that's why it was very good to have this newspaper or magazine yesterday, because I looked at the numbers from the 1930s, I looked at the propaganda from the 1930s. It's like a copy-paste thing. And that's why I write it here, you have to avoid economic reductionism. It's not only economics that causes this huge rise that you see in the graph. Okay, so the name of the party is Jobbik, as the second point explains. And as I mentioned, they are openly anti-Semitic. They are very much against the Jews. However, Jewish population in Hungary is very tiny, very small. However, historically, Jews were the scapegoats of everything bad that was happening throughout the history of the country. And if we go back to the post-First World War period, when the territory of Hungary shrank by a lot, we lost the war and a lot of territory was taken away, everybody blamed the Jews. Something bad happened during the Second World War, everybody blamed the Jews. Revolution in 1956, again. Blaming the Jews has been a constant, and for them a very successful measure, campaign. So let's look at what's happening here, what kind of causes, what kind of reasons they might show in connection with anti-Semitism, which I mentioned is a very ideological thing. As I also mentioned, they always try to give some kind of an explanation of something bad. For example, now the crisis. It's the Jews because they have all the money. It's the Jews because they have all the banks. It's a very, I would say, popular among people who are not successful. When you have somebody to blame, it's always very successful. When you see that, oh, it's not me, it's not my problem, it's because of somebody else, then you tend to believe that it's somebody else, it's really somebody else, okay? Also, unemployment, yeah, because the Jews take the jobs. There is another group which is very much hated by the extreme right, by the Jobbik party, and this is the Romas. Now, in Hungary, we have a very significant number of Roma population, about 8 to 10%. It's really hard to say because at the referendum, they don't ask you whether you're a Roma or not, but it's about 8 to 10%. And this is the same thing again, blaming the Romas for a lot of bad things happening, especially in the eastern part of the country, for the economic ills of the country, because there are these stereotypes. The Romas steal, they don't go to school, they only exist for the subsidies. These are very popular, again, in quotation marks, popular stereotypes, unfortunately. Now, I basically talked about it. Who are mostly drawn in by these very populistic measures? It's usually the young people. Young people are the ones who just get out of school. There is high unemployment among young people, and this is also very worrisome. I gave a speech last week in Budapest in connection with how I used the word sexy for the Jobbik party, because they are the only party, unfortunately, in Hungary who target the young voters. None of the other parties target the young voters, although it's election time, it's campaign time. Only the Jobbik. They have huge posters about young people, targeting young people, okay? And the use of online media is also very successful. Now, okay, let's just go back. Usually, there's a myth about, who supports these populist parties. Who do you think? Is it rich people, poor people, unemployed people, employed people? What do you think? What's the stereotypical? I see a gentleman back there. Yeah, that's what we usually say. I mean, you would say that it's the losers, the poor people, undereducated people, unemployed people, strong religious people. This is usually what we tend to believe, that these are the supporters of these nationalistic ideas. Not necessarily true. You have a lot of words written there, but I would just say that this is not necessarily the poor. We have a lot of economically active people, I'd say rich people, who are good supporters of the nationalist cause. Most of them are very educated, especially, and if you compare, I'll be done in 5 minutes. If you compare 1930s Germany or Hungary with what is happening now, you'll see the same thing. They were not stupid people necessarily. They used intelligence to persuade people to follow them. Okay? So, hurry up. This is their newspaper. This is it's a journal, a weekly journal. You see something, this is something I saw in this one. It's from the 1930s. This is last month and last 2 months. See, Israel. Israel is the scapegoat, okay? This is them marching in the streets. They use symbolism from Nazi Germany and Second World War Hungary. Oh, it's not the new. Which one? No, it's their flag. There was an arrow cross party back in the Second World War, and it had the red and white flag, and so this is a neo-Nazi flag. Football stadiums are the hotbeds of nationalists. This was in August. They commemorated the death of a person who was one of the leaders of a mass massacre in northern Hungary during the Second World War. This is them marching in Heroes Square, one of the best places in Budapest. Murder of Roma individuals. Last 3 years, we've seen a lot of Romas killed by them in the eastern part of the Hungary. Also, segregation in schools of Roma individuals who now the government says, oh, it's just so-called benevolent segregation. It's for the good of them. it is a quotation from the minister. No, it's from the minister of cultural minister. Yeah, exactly. So it's, as I mentioned, we go back. The history repeats itself, unfortunately. So I will talk a little bit about, so I will have 3 more minutes, about our practices. Our foundation decided this year, that the best thing to do is to ridicule them. Because we believe that they are, present in the social media, they are present among young people, and if you ridicule them, if you use humor, then it might be a good way to take away voters from this camp, okay? So we created a community, an online community, where we have lots of pictures, very funny ones. They might not be funny for you because they are in the Hungarian context. I will just flip through real quickly. So these are like, what's this, an iPad, it's called a Turul. Turul is their symbol. So we have the very old, more than 1,000-year-old Hungarian alphabet there, because that's what, they want to go back to the past all the time. So we created things like this. Angry Turul. Turul is the symbol of theirs. That's Hungary, that's how I love you. And a lot of things. I'll just flip through quickly. Come to Jobbik, you can play with the matches. That's what it says. As they burn the European Union flag. And yes, the beer coup. Okay, just quickly, that's, as I mentioned, this is the zebra crossing, red and white, using their symbolism. So we created, and also, 1 minute I have, last month we decided to go to football stadiums, because as I mentioned, this is their hotbed. We went to a game, and we're going to more games, and we created flags like you played your finals in 1945, no overtime for Nazis, or the other one says we are Hungarians and not racist. So imagine that we, like more than 100 people, went to a football stadium with these flags and we were chanting these things. Damage calculator, we created a damage calculator which is coming out in November to measure how much damage, so these are not the good figures, this is just wanted to show as an example, to how much damage they cause to the country, so the figures will go up. And this is the end. I will probably have a lot of questions later on, so thank you for your attention, and I hope, I don't want to say I hope you enjoyed it, but I hope you learned something from my presentation. Thank you.
Sargos, a l'amic Zoltán Kész, em sembla que ha estat una intervenció que podríem qualificar de brillant i molt interessant, tenint present el moviment polític que es viu a Europa i el moviment polític que es viu al seu país d'origen, Hongria. Realment una situació parlamentària d'un partit polític que pugui gaudir d'un suport electoral, com ell explicava, de 2/3 del conjunt de parlamentaris, és una situació que alguns voldrien per als seus propis partits polítics, però que evidentment genera unes temptacions que de vegades són prou antidemocràtiques, com s'està veient en el cas hongarès. En qualsevol cas, agraïm molt l'explicació i els raonaments que ens ha provocat i que ens ha expressat l'amic Zoltán Kész. D'Hongria ens anem cap a un país que també guarda relació, si més no lingüística, amb Hongria, que és Finlàndia, per bé que en Viktor Grandell, ell és un representant finès, però de la minoria suecoparlant d'aquest país, de Finlàndia. El senyor Grandell és cap de comunicació del Partit Popular Suec de Finlàndia, va treballar com a periodista al diari, intentaré pronunciar-ho, Hufvudstadsbladet, probablement ho he pronunciat horrorosament malament, però bé, com a mínim ho hem intentat, que és el diari suec o suecoparlant amb més circulació a Finlàndia. Finlàndia és un país interessant per a aquells que som independentistes, perquè de vegades ens pensem que hi ha molts estats de la Unió Europea que existeixen de tota la vida, no? En el cas d'Espanya, evidentment, des del Big Bang, no? Com ens explicava l'Aznar. Finlàndia apareix com a estat independent que trenca de l'imperi soviètic, de l'imperi rus, a finals de la Primera Guerra Mundial, si mal no recordo. En aquella època val a dir que a Finlàndia les elits polítiques, culturals i intel·lectuals eren bàsicament parlants de suec. Helsinki es coneixia més com a Helsingborg, i em pot corregir l'amic finès o sueco-finès, que no pas com a Helsinki. Però bé, doncs Europa, malgrat el que alguns preconitzen o ens expliquen, ha evolucionat molt en els últims segles, en els últims anys i en les últimes dècades, i esperem que més evolucioni cap a millor, si més no, en el cas de Catalunya i del conjunt d'Europa i de la Unió Europea. Bé, no m'enrotllo més, no parlo més, i crec que és el torn per donar la paraula al senyor Viktor Grandell, a qui, com a tothom, agraïm la seva presència i la seva participació en aquest acte de la Fundació CAPDEM. Senyor Grandell, endavant.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to the beautiful city of Barcelona. Can you hear me all? I will try to talk slowly and bang the windows if it goes too fast. This is, in my opinion, the root of the rise of populism in Finland. Large parts of our citizens feel disconnected and alienated, and this is true not only in the more rural areas, it's also true in the cities and the more densely populated areas. It's because of many reasons. It's because of rising differences in income, the jobs that are rapidly disappearing, and the people that feel and are left out of the post-industrial changes in the Finnish social and financial structure. There is a nostalgia for consensus, even if the consensus that people are nostalgic for might never have been there. As you know, we have a history of wars and unrest, and it might just seem from afar that we are longing back to fictional 50s that might have never existed. So, enter the True Finns. That's our populist party. I'll have to tell you, they are called the Finns officially. They changed the name from the True Finns, but I will call them the True Finns to distinguish them from the Finns as a people which I consider myself a part of, and the True Finns, the party which I don't consider myself a part of. They are right-wing populists, not right-wing extremists. They would maybe not agree to being right-wing, even if they harbor a lot of right-wing ideologists in the parliament and especially among the followers. The leader of the party chairman, leader of the party, Timo Soini, has called the True Finns a workers' party without the socialism. Be that as it may. Typically, the True Finns stand for leftist economic policies and right-wing immigrant policies. Their views on immigrants, for example, are often cleaned up for the public. Mr. Soini, for example, have a very distant grip on the immigration policies of the party, and especially the party members and politicians. He is, however, usually the first to condemn any racist tendencies amongst his politicians. Still, everybody knows the True Finns get a lot of support because of anti-democratic racist views, so they have very little incentive to clean up their act, so to say. The True Finns can effectively be divided into three fractions. All three fractions mostly agree with each other's views on different topics. They have only chosen different topics to concentrate on. The first one is the group of True Finns fighting for the forgotten people, the poor and the sick, the unemployed, the hungry. The second group are fighting for the working class. This they are doing in direct competition with the more traditional left-wing or social democratic parties in Finland. third group have distinguished themselves by fighting against immigration, immigrants from all parts of the world, mainly the MENA countries and the Romas. It would still not be fair to say all true Finns are racists. Many of the followers are farmers hanging on from the predecessor of the true Finns, the Maaseutupuolue, Farmers' Party, or at least rural party. Many of the followers are anti-EU more than racist. They belong to what we in Finland have is, instead of a religious right, they are hardline conservatives or identify themselves with the working class. Many of them also just have a hard time in general and need to cling on to any kind of hope. Still, there's very few of the racist, more extreme demographic in Finland, fascistic, call them what you will, that do not agree with the true Finns politics. Those that do not agree with the politics of the true Finns usually don't do that because of there are no movements right now, at least not any that you can. There's no movement that's more extreme than the true Finns, at least not in the parliament. The typical true Finn supporter does not really adhere to any stereotype. As my colleague here just said, you would think that the populists are, we like to think, which is a mistake of us, to think that the populists are some kind of losers, which they are not, and I think it's better to take them seriously. 2/3 are male, many own small businesses, they have an average income and a little below average education. 40% are self-described members of the working class. Where Finland is an industrial country where the industry is being driven down at the moment because of, amongst other things, the financial crisis. The followers are more nationalistic, of course, more traditional. They are for the little guy as long as the little guy is also a nationalistic, traditional, ethnic Finn. They want one national language. We now have two, Finnish and Swedish. Many of them go under the device one people, one language, which of course is somewhat of a problem for the party I work for, the Swedish People's Party in Finland. The true Finns favor economic growth before preserving nature. They're often in direct clashes with the Green Party in Finland. We could tell a little before the last parliament election that the true Finns were about to grow exponentially because of the taxi drivers. You all know that if you want to know what happens in any country, you need to talk to the taxi drivers. We have, in Finland, our taxi drivers are mainly white, middle-aged men in nice cars. And some months, some years before the election, we noticed that the taxi drivers started to echo the true Finns' political and ideological standpoints. The true Finns had a slow growth for many, many years, spurred by interest from the media. Something new was coming up, and they had some really colorful politicians in the party. As you can see here, the true Finns is, of course, the curve that you really cannot see that well, that the growth was really slow in the beginning. After each election, the elections are represented by the purple lines. After the election, they had a little spurt or something. As you can see, also after the last election, thankfully after the elections. But as you can see here, the real growth started after the economic crisis hit Finland really hard. We rolled along for a while, mainly because of loans, but the crisis got up in 2009, and the True Finns got a real boost from that one. You can see here, in 2009, the situation in Greece became a really hot topic in Finland, and in 2010, when the real growth started, partially also because of the elections, we had an emergency loan to Greece. We had the care or structure packages to Greece, Portugal, Ireland, and the European Union struggled to get these rescue packages in order. You can see the effect on the curve. The True Finns were very vocal about the situation, the financial situation and situation in the European Union, and they used words the public could understand, maybe not always the right words and maybe not always the whole truth, but they were better than the traditional parties. You can see here the Center Coalition Party and the Social Democrats in talking to the public about the crisis. The other parties, the traditional large parties, could not explain what was happening, and I myself am still not so sure of what happened, so they had a point there. The Euro crisis was not by any means the only reason for the growth of the True Finns. They were something new, something unexpected, something, an alternative to the old. They were something fresh, if you will, and they were really good at masking that they had no real ideas of their own. Still, you can see that we used to have 3 large parties, and now we have 4, which means that the political playground in Finland is changed. I don't know for how long, and I could not begin to guess which one of these 4 now large parties is the first one to not fit in anymore. So, what should we do about it? And why have the Finnish politicians from the traditional parties not been able to tackle the populist party and the populists? My guess is that we are too polite and too uncritical. We have seen a lot of scandals involving the True Finns. It looks a bit like this. These are not all True Finns, these are all in some way connected to the True Finns. The body language, you can see in the left and the topmost picture, is really clear, and this is what we're dealing with. We have seen the True Finns as part threat, part entertainment. We have laughed at them, we have ignored them, we have been scared of them, and we have wondered why the Finnish voters are flocking to them in such large numbers. What we really haven't been able to do is fight them in any meaningful way for now. The question is, what would work? We cannot ignore the True Finns. I think in Sweden the traditional parties have tried ignoring their populist party, the Sverigedemokraterna, Swedish Democrats, and that have not worked. Now the line in Sweden is we have to take the discussion, and that might be better. That doesn't work. In Finland, many of the traditional parties have tried adopting their policies, not all in all, but some fractions of them in some fractions of the traditional parties. As you can see, I use the traditional parties, which is stolen from the True Finns rhetoric. Adopting their policies doesn't work because no one will vote for the lesser populists. Why vote for the center party that has adopted some of the True Finns policies when you can vote directly for the True Finns? Fighting them head on is the only thing left to try, and what we need to do is be just more ferocious, more clear on what we believe, what the liberals believe, and what would be the effect of the True Finns gaining more power in the elections. The other way would be giving the populist responsibility. We've tried that before to the predecessors of the True Finns, Suomen maaseudun puolue, sorry translators. It's said that our then president Mauno Koivisto brought the maaseudun puolue into the cabinet in the 1980s to pacify them, which worked. The maaseudun puolue were never the same and disbanded some years after, only to rise again as the True Finns party. Responsibility seems to kill or at least disable populism, as we have seen right now when we have the True Finns in the parliament. They're a little bit sedated, at least the MPs. It's not easy being a populist when you have to take responsibility as well. Still, I would maybe sleep better if we never had to go down that road again. It's better winning fair and square. That's all I have to say for now. I think we're open for questions in a while, but thank you very much for this.
Agraïm també les paraules del senyor Viktor Grandell. Finlàndia és un cas molt interessant i un cas molt paradigmàtic, tractant-se d'un país que probablement a nivell d'indicadors educatius encapçala el rànquing mundial, juntament amb Noruega, varia molt poc any rere any, però que malgrat aquest fet, que és un bon indicador i que malauradament nosaltres no podem dir el mateix, l'auge, l'emergència del populisme també s'ha fet notar en aquella societat que té també empreses i un teixit productiu de gran importància. En aquest sentit, m'ha semblat molt adient la reflexió que ha fet final sobre de quina manera s'ha de combatre, lògicament, políticament parlant, aquest populisme que està frapant una societat desenvolupada i ben educada com és la finesa. Per un cantó, l'opció que s'ha seguit tradicionalment, que era la d'ignorar-los, deixar-los de banda. Aquesta opció s'ha vist no només en el cas finès o en el cas hongarès o en el cas flamenc a Bèlgica, que no ha estat gens positiva. Una altra opció també ha estat adoptar les seves polítiques. Aquesta opció encara s'ha vist menys positiva i l'altra opció que ens resta, com ell molt bé ens expressava, és la de combatre sense complexes políticament unes opcions que moltes vegades juguen amb els sentiments de la gent i juguen amb els sentiments d'una gent d'una forma no només interessada sinó molt confosa. Jo sempre dic que gran part dels votants d'un cas que conec una mica, que és el cas flamenc, els votants històrics del Flams Belang, que ha arribat a estar la primera força política a Flandes, doncs la gran majoria d'ells no són ni racistes, ni xenòfobs, ni nazis, ni neonazis, no? Però el discurs ben canalitzat que fan des de posicions xenòfobes, amagant allò que els interessa amagar i ensenyant allò que els interessa ensenyar, doncs, és a dir, amb una agenda oculta, fa que hi hagi molta gent que caigui en aquest parany. Per això m'ha semblat molt rellevant aquesta reflexió final que ha fet el senyor Grandell. Bé, o millor dit, esperant que serveixi de precedent, avui anem molt bé de temps, per tant podrem gaudir de les impressions, les opinions i les qüestions del públic i, si els sembla, jo començaria encetant aquest torn de pregs i de preguntes, com es deia abans, fent una pregunta als tres ponents i posteriorment passarem i donarem la paraula en el públic. Bé, la pregunta jo penso que és obligada i de rigor. L'any 2014 tindrem les eleccions europees, concretament el mes de maig. En aquests tres països que hem estat analitzant i que estem debatent, tenim fenòmens populistes que estan ja desenvolupant un rol a nivell parlamentari, inclús de política europea, com es significava abans. Fins a quin punt, i aquesta és la pregunta, aquests partits populistes, xenòfobs, ultradretans, poden marcar l'agenda política cara a les eleccions europees de 2014 en els casos de Finlàndia, de Grècia o d'Hongria. Posteriorment, com els deia, passarem a donar la paraula a la nostra audiència, al públic. Començaríem per per la senyora Rori. Endavant.
Thank you. Actually, since the economic crisis is still ongoing in Greece, the agenda is Euro-skeptical and very populist for many political parties, not only for the right-wing parties. So the government now tries to face the Golden Dawn. I'm sure you all know that they have put in jail some of the most prominent activists and the leader, and there will be a trial. So I think that the political system tries to win time before the European elections in order to marginalize a little bit the Golden Dawn, but the problem is that this discourse is common almost for all political parties in Greece. So I think that it's not only how we face extremists, which is a very urgent problem, but the thing is that since their tool is the economic crisis, I think that the European elections will be an opportunity, as all second-order elections are, in order for populists to rise. I think that the government will be punished, and since the Europeans now say that the debt issue will be dealt for Greece after the European elections, I think that the situation will be very favorable for populists and right-wing populists as well. Thank you.
All right. In Hungary, the question is, the answer is really simple and very similar to what you mentioned in connection with Greece. Both these two parties that I mentioned in my presentation are very anti-European Union, very Eurosceptic. However, there's an interesting twitch to the story in connection with the governing party, because what we notice is that the governing party, especially the prime minister, uses some kind of a double talk when he addresses people in Hungary in connection with the European Union, or when he talks abroad about the European Union. When he talks abroad, the EU is above all. When he talks in Hungary, like yesterday at the national holiday, he blames the EU for a lot of things that are happening. He's not the only politician in the European Union, I believe, who does the same thing. However, he fails to notice that in the past 3 years, 97% of investments that actually took place in Hungary were from European Union money. He never mentions that to his supporters. Also, he paints himself as the only person in the country who can, as he says, defend or protect the country from the European Union. As I mentioned last week, I was at a conference, and in the next panel, there was a leading politician from the ruling party, and he actually said this sentence. And it was a liberal conference, and everybody was like, oh my God, what is he saying? He used the sentence, only Viktor Orbán can save us from the European Union. And it's not written in the media. It's not written, obviously, because the media, most of the media is controlled by the state. So whatever online platforms we can find, we try to fight them, but I'm not saying it's impossible, it's close to impossible. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Very well.
The agenda in Finland will certainly be split in two sides, the anti-EU and the pro-EU parties. The campaigns will be about Finland, the role of EU in Finland, of course, and as you can see here, we have one moment, sorry, here. This is how the different parties in the followers of the different parties in Finland, how much they like the European Parliament. Red is they think it's great, and blue is it's bad. The true Finns are fourth from the top. one of second parties where support for the European Union has been going down. But as you can see, we have a lot of support for the European Union still in Finland, and I think that will show. The more liberal parties will talk about how a strong Europe is not only good, but we need a strong Europe to have a strong Finland, and the populists will talk about the euro crisis and how much it costs, comfortably ignoring the fact that we also get a lot from the European Union.
Molt bé. Obrim doncs el torn de preguntes i de comentaris a la mesa.
Thank you. There was a double question that I wanted to pose to both the Greek and the Hungarian friends. I think that the Finnish case is quite different from this point of view, because unlike the other two countries, as an independent country at least, you had no authoritarian or totalitarian experiences as Greece and Hungary had in their past. However, I fully agree with you that the strategy should be combating populism openly and not in the other ways that have been tried so far in so many countries. Anyway, the question for the Greek and the Hungarian friends is the following. What is the weight of history? I mean, the weight of history, of past history. Our Hungarian friend has already in part responded to this, but the most specific question is, how open, how clear is the memory of the past playing in these populist movements? I mean, is the experience of either the Horthy regime or that of the pro-Nazi cooperators during World War II playing an important part in the memory of a part of the Hungarian population, or is the Kerner's regime's memory still play a part in the positions of the Golden Dawn movement? Second question, and related with this, of course, is what is the respective role of the established churches, the Greek Orthodox Church in Greece, for example, and the Catholic Church in Hungary? I wouldn't put this question because the role of the Protestant churches in the Nordic countries is usually much more, I wouldn't say liberal, but at least much more reserved than it is in the Orthodox and Catholic countries. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll answer first, okay? Is it okay? So I mentioned a little bit of history already. However, it's good that you asked the question in connection with the Horthy regime. This is the regime that ruled the country between the two world wars. Now, what we see in Hungary is that our politicians and the majority of the public are reliving the regime, reliving the regime between the two world wars. Not only Horthy himself, he has now statues all around the country, but writers who were anti-Semitic are now brought into the like literature classes in schools, because schools are also centralized and the government tells you what to read. That's, I think, a very big problem. And as a history teacher, because I used to be a history teacher, as I mentioned, it gives me a lot of very difficult and hard time to explain to students and explain to history teachers and the public that when we look back to the past, everything bad that happened, starting with First World War, then the Horthy regime, then the extermination of the Jews at the end of the Second World War, then the communist regime, everything was done by Hungarians. See, the thing that most people do in the present government is, well, the same thing with you, is that, oh, one group is responsible for First World War. The other group is responsible for, as I mentioned, the Jews, for the war, in between war period. The communists are responsible for 56, but not Hungarians. They are not aware of the fact that when in the spring of 1944, more than 400,000 Jewish people were killed or transported in less than 3 weeks, it was the efficiency of the Hungarian authorities. It was not the Germans. The Germans were actually saying, oh, what a nice country. They are so efficient. We have to face the past. This is what our politicians are lacking. They don't want to face the past, because when you look back into the past, yesterday the Prime Minister said, I think 60 times that because of the communists. Forget about the communists. We had the transition 23 years ago. They still blame the communists for everything? Communists or the EU? The second question that you had is in connection with the church. The established church in Hungary, the majority of the people, or I should say the majority of the religious people, are Catholic. However, at the referendum in 2010, it turned out that only 11% of the population claims itself to be religious. However, when we see that the present government is made up of 2 parties, one is the Fidesz, the other is the Christian Democratic Party, which is mainly supported by the Catholic Church. And there is always government propaganda in churches. Now that the elections are nearing, we see more and more of this appearing in churches, unfortunately.
Present in the everyday, let's say, propaganda. For the church, I think it's difficult to answer. The Golden Dawn, they don't have their official, let's say, religion is the 12 gods of ancient Greece, so they're not Christians. But because they're so opportunist, during the election period, they have started to form a discourse that they were in favor of the church and the role of the church. And some of the priests, they have backed them up, but not officially. But the whole discourse of the church, I think that it helped them in some period. The official church, now that the whole identity of the Golden Dawn is revealed, they are much more critical towards it. But it took them time to react against and take a stance, an official stance. And still, we don't see them being as much condemned in the Golden Dawn as they should have. And I think that you know that the church has played a role in the past in the junta. They have backed the junta and supported them. So I think that this is why they were a little bit not so fanatically opposing now the Golden Dawn.
Molt bé. Obriríem el torn de preguntes. Algú... Perdó. Faríem primer pregunta, sisplau, la identificació, i aquí adrecem el comentari o la pregunta de la taula. I després vostè.
Okay, my name is Andreu Termes, and this is more about a kind of idea than a direct question to all speakers and also moderator, and it's related to what Professor Casals told in the conference before. And this is about let's say, populism paradigm. This new paradigm, yes, do you understand what I mean? Well, this new scheme, let's say, it's not only about left or right-wing scheme, and I want to refer what Hungary case about the radical collectivism, I think were the words, and also what Workers' Party without a socialism is about the true fins. And this, what I'm trying to explain is that this new populism is not only about left and right. it's something more. And I think that if we want to afford this kind of parties, we have to rethink the way we affront these parties. And I don't know with what kind of concepts or what kind of theoretical framework we can use to afford this. I don't know if it can be a kind of populism versus democracy or versus liberalism or whatever, but I'm not sure that all the concepts are still using useful concepts.
Whom is this question addressed to?
Everybody.
Everybody, the three of you.
Moltes gràcies, bon dia. Jo tenia una mica...
El seu nom, sisplau.
Marga Manero. Marga Manero. Jo tenia a la meva retina la imatge de Grècia. El radicalisme i fins i tot la violència que havia vist en aquest Parlament em semblava que era una mica com un fet aïllat. De les 4 conferències d'avui, analistes, investigació, representants de partits polítics i Plataforma, m'adono que és un moviment molt fort que afecta Europa de nord a sud i d'est a oest i que, com deia el representant de Finlàndia, ignorar-lo seria el més greu que es podria fer. També em sembla que és difícil combatre aquest moviment des dels partits més tradicionals d'arrel més democràtica, perquè com que la majoria d'ells estan en els governs, tenen el desgast propi de les polítiques que sempre no es poden atendre i que la ciutadania demana. Independentment d'això, aquests partits hauran de canviar de manera molt ràpida i hauran d'utilitzar eines que normalment, pel seu, a vegades hi ha assentament en les societats, no han vingut utilitzant com són les xarxes socials, però que ara n'hauran de fer bandera per arribar a molta gent. Però de tot això, el que m'ha cridat més l'atenció i el que voldria una mica més d'informació és de la Plataforma Cívica d'Hongria, d'aquesta fundació. Com que els partits tenen aquest problema, em sembla que aquesta fundació pot tenir un paper molt rellevant. Un paper molt rellevant sempre que jo pugui entendre quina és la filosofia que la inspira. Deia, les nostres funcions, els nostres objectius són escoltar i explicar. Escoltar no és cap problema. En tot cas, on veig la reconversió o el problema és en el respondre. És a dir, respondre com? Sota quina finalitat? Sota quina doctrina? Per quins objectius? On vol arribar aquesta plataforma? Què vol combatre? Si no té arrel, diguéssim, de vot popular, com pot tenir aquests canals o aquesta influència tan important? A part que, si ho he entès bé, el representant d'Hongria té 2 problemes. Per una part el populisme i per l'altra un govern excessivament poc democràtic. Agrairia una mica més d'informació. Gràcies.
Bé, moltes gràcies. Després passarem al següent torn de preguntes. Endavant la taula amb les respostes.
I can try to answer something about the new populist paradigm and how to fight populism. I think you cannot fight populism with facts, because if that was the case, we would already have won. We need to fight them with their own tools, invoke feelings, and be more, I don't know, more feelings. We need to raise the feelings of the people that are or could be more liberal. We need to present ourselves as a real alternative with real tools to solve real crises. We cannot just say that the EU works as an answer to the EU doesn't work, because no one cares. We need to show why it works, and we need to be less specific about it. The feelings are what's important. Yeah, facts and technicalities, no one's interested. That's the road we're going down, and we need to get on that road. That's all I have.
For the Greek case, I would say that the problem is that until the end of the 80s, all the political parties were populist in Greece, no matter if they were right-wing or left-wing. So I think that the political system now pays the price of being also populist in the past, because now that the mainstream parties, PASOK and New Democracy, try to be really, to tell the truth to the people and face the problem of the economic crisis, they are so delegitimized, so whatever they do, it doesn't arrive in the ear of the voter. So I think that one thing is that you cannot fight populism in a conjuncture of the crisis. The popular culture and the mentalities, they change only in the long term. So now the problem in Greece since the beginning of the crisis is that all the anti-memorandum parties, which are very populist, they're much more strong than the liberal ones, and they're much quicker. Democracy reacts really slower vis-a-vis the populists, because they have to face the real problems, whereas the populists, they don't face now the problems, they're not in government. What can we do? I think that you just have to be persistent and solve the problems and reinvent politics from grassroots campaigns. I think that the political parties, mainstream political parties, have to go and speak to everyday people. They cannot only speak in the media and with the EU representatives. I think that you have to reinvent the link between the political parties and the people without being populist. I think it's difficult. And as for theoretical framework, I don't know, because I'm not a specialist of populism, but I think that there is what we have to let's say distinguish is that there are legitimate grievances in the populist discourse. I mean that we have to say which of the demands of the people are real problems that need to be faced and which ones are, let's say, only populist propaganda. Because now people in Greece really suffer, and you cannot say that everything is populism. You have to distinguish things, I think.
Well, I see a lot of questions are for me, and I can spend days talking about what our foundation does and how we try to tackle the problems. But let me just answer the gentleman first and then come back to the lady in connection with that question. So, well, asking a question in Hungary about left and right is a very tricky thing. Most people don't know what left and right means. They think that this party is the right party because they claim to be the right-wing party, and that's the left-wing party because they claim to be left-wing. For what reasons? There is a huge self-definition problem, not only in Hungary, I believe, but in a lot of places. We have 5 political parties in parliament, none of which are real right-wing parties, none of which are conservative, none of which are liberal. We have 5 political parties in parliament pursuing very leftist propaganda, very leftist policies. And when you, from other countries in the European Union, I talked to that gentleman from Austria about liberalism. In Hungary, we don't have a liberal alternative. We don't have a liberal party that would tell people about liberal policies. We don't have a real conservative party in the sense, not even in the sense of like the American Republican Party or the British Conservative Party. We have the ruling party who claims to be conservative, but the only reason they think they are conservative is because they respect the past. That's what they believe conservatism is about. We know it's not. And here I turn to what you asked me. Our responsibility, one way or the other, is education. And I think our foundation has been doing a pretty good job in connection with educating people. But we are a generation behind, and we cannot go to the streets and educate people over 40. We have to go to high schools, we have to go to universities and talk to people. We don't want to indoctrinate them. We don't want to tell them this is right or that is right. We want to communicate with them, helping them understand what the processes are, how things are going, trying to explain to them what is left, what is right in the European context or in the American context, just to give them an idea how things should be going. Our organization in the past 2 years has been doing a lot of this job. I mean, we went to high schools. I did most of the things, like since I was a teacher in the past, and the response is positive. But you know, it's almost an impossible task to go to every single school, to talk to every single student, and tell them that what they see now on the political agenda is not what reality should be about. And let me ask you a question, and let me ask the audience a question in this sense, in sense of education. Aren't we responsible for all these things happening? Just an example, in connection with the protection of free speech. I mean, in the audience probably we have a lot of liberal people, and liberal people tend to protect free speech. But when I look at my example in Hungary last month, when there was a speech given by the extreme right publicly at one of the national holidays, and this leader of the extreme right said that all the Jewish people should be put in wagons and shipped to work camps. This was a few months ago. Last week, the High Court in Hungary declared it's protected by free speech. There was no incitement because he said it to a group which has the same ideas. So, would it be incitement if he was talking about, let's say, tolerance? If you talk about tolerance in a group of fascists, then that's incitement. I mean, it's crazy. And that's where my question comes into the picture. How responsible are we, educators, politicians, civic leaders? So we can talk about that, I think.
Més que no pas una pregunta, és una autèntica declaració diria d'intencions i de responsabilitats, no? Tenim més preguntes. La primera la faria el senyor Xavier Casals i no sé si hi hauria en aquesta ronda de preguntes algú més que voldria fer cap pregunta a la taula. I la Margaret, endavant.
Sobre el que estàvem comentant ara, de què s'ha de fer amb el populisme i com lluitar-hi, jo voldria recordar que a França, a principis dels anys 90, aquest va ser el gran debat i hi va haver moltes aportacions. Jo concretament en recordo una que es deia «Pour combattre le Front National», i aleshores allà feia una llista d'estratègies que s'havien seguit, com prohibir-lo, diabolitzar-lo, silenciar-lo, copiar-lo. I aleshores concloia, concretament, un politòleg que es diu Pierre-André Taguieff, que hi havia 3 estratègies que calia fer prospecció. Aquestes 3 eren, d'una banda, per què no entrar en el govern i deixar que aquests partits deixessin de ser antisistèmics, és a dir, capitalitzar la protesta, i convertir-se en partits de govern. I després hi havia 2 estratègies més. Una era la que estava plantejant aquí en Kész, i la que planteja també en Grandell, que és el que ella en deia l'hostigament o l'acusament argumentatiu. És a dir, generalment es diu, com que aquests partits diuen tantes bajanades, no cal contestar-les. Doncs bé, el que es plantejava és s'han de contestar, s'han de deconstruir i s'ha de fer pedagogia, perquè no hi ha molts més elements. I la tercera estratègia que plantejaven és que sovint aquests partits, no és el cas d'alguns que trobem aquí, però sí pot ser per exemple el del Front Nacional, sorgeixen en medis que estan degradats, en barris que s'han convertit en suburbis, en llocs on la ciutadania se sent abandonada per l'Estat. I aleshores, òbviament, aquests partits són el símptoma. Si es vol acabar amb aquests partits, el que s'ha de fer és fer inversió pública en aquests indrets i recuperar aquest electorat i portar-lo cap a la normalitat. Ho dic perquè això és el gran tema d'aquest debat, ja fa 2 dècades que està circulant. I aprofito per fer una tanda de preguntes als 3 participants. Jo li voldria demanar a la senyora Rori que m'expliqués 2 qüestions. Es parla d'un partit que es diu Grecs Independents i jo no sé ben bé on es situa aquest partit, em sembla que és una dreta populista que ha substituït a un altre que es deia Laos. També volia comentar-li que un corresponsal de premsa va comentar després de l'assassinat del raper grec que el suport a Alba Daurada continuava sent del 7% a les enquestes. És a dir, que malgrat que estaven acusats d'un assassinat, el suport del partit no baixava. Voldria saber si això era així com ho valorava. En el senyor Kész li voldria preguntar si el govern, malgrat està fent aquestes polítiques, no perd suport, com a mínim a les enquestes, i si, per exemple, iniciatives com les que fa la seva fundació de ridiculitzar aquests partits són útils de cara a la gent que segueix aquests partits, no els que ja estan convençuts de no seguir-los. I finalment, el senyor Grandell li voldria preguntar si finlandesos autèntics ha perdut suport i si no tinc mal entès, abans de finlandesos autèntics no hi havia hagut extrema dreta en el Parlament finlandès. Per tant, això és una novetat. I saber què ha aportat finlandesos autèntics per aconseguir-ho. I amb això ja no em vull estendre més.
Moltes gràcies. Abans de la Margaret faríem un torn de respostes i després passaríem a la següent ronda de preguntes i comentaris.
Thank you for the question. Independent Greeks is a party that emerged during the economic crisis. It was actually born as a splinter party of New Democracy. Panos Kamenos, who is the leader of the party, was a prominent deputy of New Democracy. And after the second bailout agreement in February 2012, it was then that Independent Greeks became a party. After the vote in the parliament, they left New Democracy and they became a party. Actually, it was strengthened through the internet. In the beginning, they had nothing. They didn't have offices. They had nothing. Only through the net. They were a lot favored by all this anti-memorandum discourse, and they're quite conspirationist, the most conspirationist party in Greece, anti-globalization, and the most anti-German party as well. So it's not exactly replacing Laos, because Laos was more, it was for 10 years in the political scene. It had a consistent anti-immigrant agenda. They don't have the same profile. I would say that Independent Greeks are the most populist party because they can say the 1 minute, they can say one thing and then the other. And what is very interesting to know about the Independent Greeks is that it was the only party that did not vote yesterday in the parliament against the banning of the funding of the Golden Dawn. So they tried to incorporate the electorate of the Golden Dawn. They're very opportunist. And the other thing is that it is the only party that Syriza is willing to cooperate in order to have a government. So this is the populist discourse you can see there. Syriza, they have, it's not official, but they discuss with the Independent Greeks, and there have been, let's say, friendly declarations in the media from Alexis Tsipras for Panos Kamenos and the other way around. So you can see how a left populist party can discuss. No, we don't know if they will cooperate, but they have this, you know, unofficial relation. And the other question was about the forces of the Golden Dawn. I think that the fact that they still keep their electoral forces in the polls, and in some polls they have more than 7%, still now that, you know, this whole anti-Golden Dawn campaign is going on in the media, and the government, they prosecute all the activists. I think that it shows that the phenomenon is deeply rooted in Greece. I don't think that we will finish easily with extremism, right-wing extremism. And this is why we have to discuss very seriously how we can deal with the problem once the social link is already broken. Because what we discuss now in this room is for you know, facing situations that you're not over the edge. Greece is over the edge, and when we speak, let's say, for education, what can teachers do in schools if their parents vote for the Golden Dawn, if they take their kids in the Golden Dawn's offices, and they are, you know, the Golden Dawn is doing teaching for kids of 4 years old until 18. So the problem is that when the family is in the extremist party, when they're willing to back up, I think this is the real problem, because maybe the teachers, they don't have the force. I mean, my parents, they teach in secondary schools in popular suburbs, and they tell me that the parents that back up the Golden Dawn and that they do the propaganda for their kids. So it's really difficult how one can face the problem. I think that the state needs to be very, very severe, and you know, there have to be rules, and everybody needs to respect. And this is why I think the whole discourse on liberalism has some limits, and we saw it in Greece. I mean, we were very liberal vis-a-vis the Golden Dawn the last 2 years, and we saw what happened. I mean, they were more and more violent, and we knew that they had arrived to 17% in the polls. They were the third party, and they still are. So I think that we have to discuss seriously, and it will take very many years.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understood your question correctly, but I will try to answer it still. The true Finns have lost support after the election, you said. I think that's not true, not as much as the other parties have lost support. As you saw in the curves I showed you, we now have 4 large parties, of which the True Finns are one. It's as likely in the next election that, for example, the Social Democrats will lose the election compared to the True Finns. Their support is a bit shaky because I think some of it is taken from other parties, and there's a lot of undecided voters. So it's, as you saw on the support curve, there's really no way to tell at any given moment what's the exact support. We have to see in the elections. There have been no extreme right in the Finnish parliament before. Yes, at least not since before my parents were born. That's history. And another question was what the True Finns have done to gain support before the elections. One thing is they were an alternative. They presented themselves as an alternative to the reality that brought us, for example, the Euro crisis. There's a lot of things. We have EU skepticism, we have skepticism of immigration to Finland. We have what they also had was some really colorful politicians that brought support around the persons. some of them weren't politicians at the time. They were, for example, bloggers that gained support and were picked up by the True Finns. I think that answers part of what you asked me. Thank you.
All right. In connection with Hungary, you had two questions. One was whether the governing party is losing support or not, and the other was referring to my organization, how successful we are in connection with ridiculing, yes? Okay. So, answering the question whether the party is losing support or not, I would say a tricky answer. Yes, but no. Now let's see how it's achieved. There is a new Voting Rights Act in Hungary, and according to the new Voting Rights Act, in the suffrage, in the voting population, now they are including people, Hungarians, who are not residents of Hungary, but they were granted the citizenship as they live over the borders in Romania, Ukraine, Slovakia. You know, after the First World War, a lot of Hungarian territory was taken away, but now we still have a lot of ethnic Hungarians living in these countries who now are very happy to be the citizens of Hungary and vote at our national elections, although they don't pay taxes or anything. And most of them, according to the statistics, about 90% of them support the ruling party because they are the ones who gave them this right. Logical. On the other hand, yeah, we're going to have a new Tea Party in Boston, or not in Boston, in Budapest. So, on the other hand, we have a lot of people who are disappointed in the new government. Obviously, it's pure mathematics. They are losing, the party is losing their support. But these people are mainly now in the category of undecided voters. Because look at this logic. They are disappointed in the ruling party, but they would never vote for the socialists. Who should they vote for? There is no alternative. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, my Kész Zoltán, not the civic platform. In my opinion, what we need is maybe we need the present government to rule again for another 4 years, and in the meantime build up a totally new opposition, because our opposition now is just a chaos. We have 4 politicians fighting to be the leaders of the opposition. We have these 4 politicians not showing any kind of sensible alternative to these undecided voters. And especially in the countryside, where you have people who are disappointed, like my parents, who are disappointed at this new government. They asked me the question, okay, but who should I vote for? Very good question. Especially when I look at what my foundation is doing, because our foundation has the goal of increasing voter turnout. Because what seems to be happening now, according to statistics, we have less than 40% of people who want to vote. It's not very good. So maybe this is a good solution to build up a new opposition in the next 4 years, and with this new opposition, go against the ruling party. Answering your other question in connection with ridiculing ridicule the radicals, that's the terminology that we use. I would say it's becoming quite popular. People like humor, not the radicals. Radicals don't like humor, which makes it a bit dangerous for us to go to stadiums and produce all these funny cartoons and pictures. But, we have to face these dangers and we have to fight them. Otherwise, there will be nobody to fight them, nobody to face this problem. And I believe that humor can help. Not in the short run, but in the long run. So I'm very optimistic about that.
Faríem la darrera ronda de preguntes i de comentaris. Demanaria, sisplau, a l'audiència que fos el més breu possible i també ho demanaria en els nostres estimats participants. Margaret, sisplau, després faríem el senyor Fabregat i finalment el senyor Arcalesi.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Si és molt breu, sí, sisplau. Estem una mica justos de temps.
I'll be quick. I have a question. My name is Margaret Lupino. I have a question about the Finnish case. What is the role that language plays in populism and in Finnish politics in general, and between Swedish and Finnish, if that plays a role at all? And also in the Hungarian case, are there any other initiatives like your platform doing the same things that you're doing?
Senyor Fabregat.
Sí, aviam, entenc que els casos... És la llei de Murphy, això. Els casos dels partits antieuropeistes en cada una de les nacions és diferent, la proporció. Però en el cas de que a cada un dels llocs vagi endavant el moviment antieuropeista, creuen que poden produir-se, diguéssim, la decisió de retirar-se de la Unió Europea en cada un dels casos, ara en les properes eleccions i en el futur?
I have this question. There are some criteria that are called the Copenhagen criteria, according to which you wouldn't be admitted in the European Union unless you meet some standards in terms of human rights. Now, as an Italian, I'm very disappointed that the European Union didn't impose on Italy, that was a founding member, sanctions because of the media concentration situation in Italy. I was wondering, what would you think of a possible European Union action against the constitutional changes in Hungary that would not allow today Hungary to be admitted if it were not already in? Would it be counterproductive or positive?
Molt bé, faríem la darrera qüestió, reiteraríem la demanda de brevetat i, sisplau, el seu nom.
Bé, el meu nom és Toni Prats. Aleshores, la meva pregunta va amb el senyor Viktor Grandell, que diu que és director de comunicacions del Partit Popular Suec a Finlàndia. Vol dir que és el director de comunicacions del PP Popular Suec a Finlàndia. Llavors, volia fer-li dues preguntes en concret. Primera, quin és el mapa o quina és la situació lingüística de Finlàndia respecte al suec i el finès? És a dir, quin tant per cent de la població parla habitualment d'això? Després, la segona pregunta és, tenint en compte que Finlàndia ens està presentat sempre, té la imatge d'un país molt adelantat en temes de formació i educació, volia preguntar-li si a Finlàndia s'estudiava el suec també i quina era la llengua vehicular que s'utilitzava a les escoles fineses actualment, si era l'inglès, el finès o el suec o conjuntament qualsevol dels tres. Gràcies.
Molt bé, endavant amb les respostes.
Okay, I can answer both of you at once. We have a little over 5% Swedish speakers in Finland. We have a whole school system for the Swedish speakers. I myself have lived my life almost completely in Swedish in Finland, which is a mistake of me, of course, but that's how it turned out. I've studied, my whole studying process was wholly in Swedish, and I've drifted into workplaces where I could speak Swedish almost exclusively. I can speak Finnish, but there's very little use in a normal day for my Finnish. I speak Finnish every day, of course, but not that much. every Finn studies compulsory Swedish in school. That's a large red flag for the populists in Finland. And just recently there's been a collection of names, what do you call it, to get rid of the compulsory Swedish education in Finland. They needed 50,000 names and they got it easily. To go back in time, Finland was a part of Sweden for hundreds of years, and the populists have spun that fact to Sweden being a occupying power, even though it was a very long time ago and we were a part of Russia after that. That means for the populists that the remaining Swedish-speaking minority is part of the occupying power and have some sort of different agenda, which makes the Swedish-speaking minority a scapegoat for a lot of things. For example, we cost a lot is a popular sentiment. It's we have some rights. We have education in Swedish. We have some further education in Swedish. We have the right to go through the judiciary system in Swedish. Not all of us use that right that often, but we have the right, and that brings costs. I'm sure we bring in some money into Finland as well as a minority, but that's not usually mentioned. Swedish is studied in Finland. I answered that one. The linguistic situation, it is what it is. It's been at least for 100 years there's been some tension between Finnish and Swedish speakers that blooms. Sometimes it's blooming right now and usually it dies down. But one must remember that the Swedish minority in Finland is constantly shrinking. Even if we grow as a number, especially in areas like Helsinki and parts around Helsinki, we still shrink as a part of Finns. We should get more babies. It's not always that easy.
Un matís al comentari que ha fet l'amic Toni Prats. El nom és una mica confós. Es diu Partit Popular, però no forma part del Partit Popular Europeu, sinó, com no pot ser d'altra manera, amb un seminari organitzat pels liberals europeus i per Convergència i per la Fundació CAPDEM, doncs forma part del partit ALDE i de la Internacional Liberal.
Perdó, jo m'he limitat a repetir el que diu el programa, directora de comunicació, Partit Popular Suec.
Sí, però ha fet esment el Partit Popular com si es tractés d'un vincle.
If I understood well, the question was whether these anti-European parties will stay in the EU if they are in government. I say that it is conditional on many things. The first is how the economic situation will develop in Greece, and if the European let's say partners will deal with the question of debt sooner or later, because we all know that Greece has followed the whole recipe, but it's not as effective as one could wait. So it's the 6th year of recession, and I think that it will depend a lot on how we will deal with this problem. More particularly, let's say for Syriza, I think that 3 years ago, I would say that it would be very probable that it would get out of the EU if it was in government, but I think that it's now integrating in the system very quickly. But because it has been so radical in the past, you cannot be really sure what will happen, because it has at least 30% of internal opposition, which is very anti-European and very radical. So in, let's say, critical votes in the parliament, I think that the leader is not really sure whether he can, let's say, whether he can impose his will in the party, because it was so much a splinter party. It was not really a real party until 2 months ago. It's now becoming a real party. It was a coalition of groupuscules in the past. But it will also depend if in the next elections, let's say Syriza would win government, it would also depend from the coalition partner, because it's not the same thing to be in government with independent Greeks who are so anti-European and to be in government with, let's say, PASOK. So I think that things depend a lot on what will happen first in the economy and second in terms of coalition government.
So I have three very short answers. One is in connection with other initiatives in Hungary. Well, there are some civic organizations who try to help, but I would not say that they are as powerful. But we try to be a kind of like an umbrella organization to collect them and get their ideas, have different agendas run together. But we need more. The other question in connection with whether Hungary should be separated from the EU, and I will connect it to your question in connection with the Copenhagen criteria and the media law and the new constitution. Look, if I were the European Union, I'd be very radical in connection with Hungary. I'd be very strict in connection with Hungary. But the thing is, Hungary, especially the ruling party, has a lot of friends in the European Union. The European People's Party needs our ruling party. They have 14 members there. Of course, they are a very powerful entity in the European People's Party itself. Exactly, very good. So our government balances pretty well between Hungary and between the European Union. And living outside of the European Union, look, yesterday I was just checking, I wasn't being rude, but I was checking it on the phone, yesterday's banners, and I read two interesting things on the government rally. One said, "There is life outside the EU." The other banner said, "We will not be a colony of Brussels." It tells you everything. And this is the rhetoric our Prime Minister uses all the time. So I'm speaking against my country, but I would be very strict. Don't just look at the numbers. The numbers can be manipulated. Look at our new constitution. Look at the media law. Look at human rights. But the EU doesn't do that. I'm finished.
Doncs només ens cal agrair moltíssim la presència, la participació i les paraules dels amics ponents de 3 estats diferents de la Unió Europea, de Finlàndia, de la minoria sueca finesa, de Grècia i d'Hongria. Aquestes paraules finals de l'amic hongarès em recordava en unes eleccions europees de fa ja una colla d'anys que hi havia un polític espanyol d'origen andalús que criticava aquella Europa de los mercenarios, no? Perdó, de los mercenarios, de los mercaderes, no? Presentats aquests com si fossin autèntics mercenaris. Aquesta Europa dels mercaders és una Europa que hem construït i hem forjat entre tots i que ha produït, a través de l'economia en aquest cas, una millor acollida de tot el fet europeu i una millor acollida de tots aquells europeus que han viatjat i han treballat per una Europa on les diferències culturals, ètniques, religioses es puguin trobar en un mateix punt de partida, d'origen i un punt d'estació final. Crec que ha estat un debat molt interessant, agraïm també la participació del públic i ara farem una pausa per dinar i posteriorment a la tarda hi tornarem amb una mica més de debat i de bon humor. Moltes gràcies.